We'll go over the steps, but we won't get too into it until we're actually doing the steps, because it's a pretty long process. It can take like around 15 hours per hide. This is a good example of really good buckskin. It's like really supple and really buttery. It doesn't have any crisp to it. There's no grain left on it. So if you get a roadkill deer or you hunted it, you're going to take the skin off, which we won't get to do today because we got the hides from the freezer that were already skinned for us. And fleshing. So fleshing is a step that we are going to do today. So fleshing means that you're going to take your hide that's going to have, leftover meat chunks and some fat and some fascia or the membrane left on it. And you're going to take your scrapers and be scraping that off. So Steven's using a shell to flesh his hide. He's still holding it at like a 45-degree angle, just how he's used it using the scraper. He's just kind of slowly working off all the little bits. So this is going to change the pH of your hide and kind of swell up the grain, so that come next week when we're ready, the hair, it will also, slip the hair out, and then underneath that will be the grain layer, which will be nice and swollen so that you can easily scrape it off. It needs to soak for, if the weather's really warm, it needs to soak for less time. So we're probably going to soak it for a week, which is a little much, but I think we could probably get away with like 4 days. The hide's been soaking for about a week now, and we're going to check to see if they're ready, if the grain is swollen enough. Usually you can tell by, the grain being really swollen. But I think we should wash them out, and you can throw them in the log. You can really test by trying to scrape, and if it comes off really easily, you'll know that the grain's ready. The hair is slipping really nicely, which is a good sign. We're going to start with the neck, because it's the most work, and it's the last area of the hide to have the grain get swollen. So if you can see the difference of where I scraped? This is like kind of a swollen area, and underneath sort of a different texture. All this hair were to slip off, what would be left is like a grain layer, the cuticle layer. It's where all the hair follicles kind of fit into the hide. And so you want to scrape that off because it will prevent the brain later on from penetrating into the hide. So now that we're done graining, we started leaching out the hides in just water, and changing out the water for the past 2 days. And we're going to start balancing the pH by adding a little bit of vinegar to the water.
Oh, really?
Now we've soaked them in vinegar for 10-15 minutes, and we're about to rinse them out in a clean bucket of water and start membraning them. But you're just taking the fleshing tool and scraping just like you were graining at a 45-degree angle, long strokes, and just trying to get as much of that membrane off as possible. Again, it's not like super vital that you get every little bit off like you're trying to for the grain, but you want to get as much off as possible. So we've fleshed the hides, we've bucked them, we've grained them, we've balanced the pH, and now we're ready to brain them. But first, we're going to do some hole repairing and sew up holes. What you're going to do for your holes is you're not going to start in the very edge. You're going to start maybe like 1/4 of an inch away and make like a gradual increase into the hide, versus if you just do this and sew it up, it makes it really it sticks out a lot more than it has to. So you're going to have your solution that you're going to be braining it in, and we're going to brain them overnight to make sure that the brains are really saturating and penetrating through the fibers into the hide, to make it really supple and buttery and fluff out the membranes. But while it's braining, you have to take it out periodically and wring it, and we'll do this certain wringing style called the donut. And you get as much moisture out as you can from the hide, and then you put it back in the brains and resaturate it again.
That is correct.
So you're gonna dump it in, and then you're gonna. Some people put brains in like a blender, but I just use my hands and mush it up. The brain and egg solution, and we're gonna add just enough water to kind of cover the hide. You don't want to add too much; it'll be too diluted. Just come by once in a while and just give it a little stretching, especially around the neck and the spine and the butt, where it has a harder time penetrating because it's thicker. And this technique is called the donut. So what you're basically doing is you're putting just the edge over the top. You're taking the bottom and kind of wrapping it around. And you're going to be folding the edges just a few inches at a time inward until you create like a donut shape. Hence the donut. Then I put the bucket underneath so anything that comes out goes back in. We want to make sure we try and save as much of the brain solution as possible. Then you take your ringing stick and you twist it around. And so what you're basically trying to do is get as much moisture out of the hide as possible. But if you just let it sit overnight and you don't stretch it at all, it doesn't really penetrate that well.
So you're going to soak it
in the brains, yeah.
Soak it and wring it 3 times.
Yep, and then keep it in your bucket overnight, and we'll do it once more in the morning before we start softening. And for the most part, it's pretty wrung out. Take it off. See how much moisture is gone from the hide? Yeah. You can stretch it out, put it back in the brains. And it will resaturate and help move the brain solution into, farther into the fibers. So we're doing the final wringing this morning. We're wringing them out as much as possible so that they're pretty dry. So this is a good example of being dry enough. The spots are starting to turn tan. There's not too many spots that are sort of blue. So everyone's wrung out their hide, dried them out as much as possible, and we're going to start hand softening them. We have these softening stakes that we're going to be using periodically, and we're also just going to soften with our hands like this. So you're going to take your hide and you're going to stretch it basically in every direction over and over and over again. And you're going to use your softening stake to kind of roll it over, making sure every area is kind of covered and stretched out. So basically what you're doing is you're trying to dry it while the cells are still separated, because if the cells are dry and they're together, you're not stretching them enough, then it can get really stiff. But if you're stretching it and it's drying where they're separated, it's going to allow them to be really supple and flexible. So you're basically doing this until it's dry. The shortest time I've ever done it in is like 2 hours, and the longest has been 10. So we have a really nice sunny day, so it might take only like 6 or so, depending on how fast they're dry. And you'll know when it's dry because you'll be able to put it to your cheek and it'll be warm to touch versus really cool. And also if you grab it, so if I grab it like this, it stays together. But if you take a hide that's already softened, like this one, and you grab it, it kind of reverts back to its, more flattened state. Don't spend like too much energy like muscling it for the next few hours. You just want to give it one really good stretch right now in the beginning, and then just kind of, stretch it a little bit, but not constantly. At the end, you'll do it constantly.
It kind of buffs it out, makes it
The last step, well, the step before smoking it, we brained it and then softened it in a timely fashion so it wouldn't harden, and this is the outcome. A soft and buttery hide.
So they're trimming their hides up. They're cutting the rougher, stiff bits on the edges out, and just basically cutting off any parts they don't want before they smoke it. So we're gonna sew up our hides this morning in preparation for smoking. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to find a buddy that has the same size hide as yours to make the sewing easy, because we're going to be putting our hides together and sewing around the edges and making basically like a big pillowcase for the smoking process. So it's easiest if you either fold your hide over and sew up the edges, or you find a partner that has the same size hide. So this is the final process, smoking the hides. And what we did is we made a fire on the outside of the pit. We just have a little pit here. And once the fire burned down to just coals, we threw the coals in there and covered it with some of this punk wood. Any rotten wood will do. And then you just tie it up with the string and use these clothespins to plug up any holes, and attach the smoking skirt at the bottom, and just give it some time to smoke. You really want the smoke to penetrate into the hide. So what smoking does for the hides is that it makes it rot proof, so it prevents mold or different rot from growing on it. It prevents insects from harming it. They won't eat it if it's been smoked. And it makes it water resistant, so if you get your hide wet, instead of having to soften it all over again, you just have to like let it dry out and give it a little tug, and it will revert back to the suppleness that it's at. So now that we've finished making our buckskins, we can make beautiful things out of them.
And my plan is to make a purse for my girlfriend.
I think I might make some moccasins with help from the cameraman.